period of emergency, and then we will look at relaunching. Resuming debate.
Member for Foothills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise today to speak on Bill C-16, but I do want to say that I will be sharing my time with the member from Beauce. I know that we are all going to be supporting this bill today, Mr. Speaker, and I think that goes to show that we are supporting Canada's agriculture sector. But I think, there are some issues with how this was brought about, in terms that it highlights many of the issues that we have been trying to shine a light on with the government's approach to agriculture as a whole and the industry within Canada. Certainly, what is being proposed today, which I certainly feel will be supported by all the parties in this House, is this again an additional loan capacity. It is not an injection of funds or a program that is going to give liquidity to the agriculture sectors as a whole. And I did ask the minister if this was a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, or was this more of a response to what is going to be facing Canada's dairy sector as a result of the increased imports that are going to be coming from the United States as part of the USMCA agreement. The minister did say in her response that the Dairy Commission had the loan capacity and the line of credit to deal with the COVID pandemic when it was at its peak, when restaurants had closed, schools were closed. Many of the traditional traditional customers of Canada's dairy producers were closing their doors and were temporarily on lockdown. And as a result of that, many of our producers, especially in Eastern Canada, were having to dump millions of liters of milk, which is not something I think any Canadian wants to see. And certainly it was good to see Canadians from across this country step up and do everything they could to help our producers, whether that was food banks, schools, or anyone that was willing to take or donate their product to those who could have use for it. However, with that response, what this says to me is this is more of a response as to what is going to be happening with the USMCA, and the dairy industry in Canada is going to be taking a hit as a result of that, as we have given up a great deal of our trade sovereignty in signing that USMCA. Not only are we going to be increasing capacity or increasing imports of American dairy products, but it has also limited Canadian dairy producers and their opportunities to access foreign markets, and also limited the growth of certain products that are produced right here in Canada. But the other issue that comes to mind here is how long it took for the Liberal government to address a problem that was highlighted very early on in Canada's agriculture sector. And that has been an ongoing issue with the current government. And let's just take a step back at what was announced last week with this agriculture assistance package of about $250 million. To put that in perspective, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture asked for $2.6 billion as a relief, as the numbers that they were looking for to be a tangible relief for Canadian agriculture. So when that announcement came out to be less than 10% of what is deemed by the industry, by producers, by our food processors, by our ranchers, by our farm families, and what is needed for them to be able to keep their head above water during this pandemic, is extremely frustrating for our producers. Let's put that in perspective. $250 million to Canadian agriculture when the President of the United States has given $19 billion. That is making our industry at a considerable competitive disadvantage. And you look at all the other programs that have been announced for Canadian businesses, and Canadian agriculture is getting a fraction of that. That is extremely difficult when the Prime Minister is saying time and time again that Canadian agriculture is an essential service, is a critical pillar of our food security, of our economy. But to say that in one breath and then not offer the resources they need to be successful doesn't make a lot of sense. And we're seeing the clear frustration from Canadian farmers and producers and food processors who have certainly voiced their displeasure and their frustration over the past week since the announcement from the Minister of Agriculture. Now, even today, the Minister of Agriculture has said time and time again that there are business risk management programs in place that agriculture can access. Those business risk management programs were never designed to deal with a pandemic like COVID-19. They were designed to deal with other variables that certainly impact various sectors of agriculture, certainly not a global pandemic. And she talks about this number of $1.6 billion that is there in agri-stability, for example. Well, let's use agri-stability as an example. Less than 35% of farmers have actually subscribed to agri-stability because it's not efficient and it's not timely. They may not see a payment for months, even years down the road. By that time, they could be bankrupt. Let's take a look at Agri-Invest. She said there's another $1 billion in Agri-Invest. But producers have asked, who has that money? Where is it? Who's accessible to it? In many cases, those dollars have already been spent, or they're being put aside for transition to the next generation. But in no other program has the government asked, say for example, CEBA, no other program has the government said to those small business owners, you better drain out your savings account before you can access or qualify for the emergency business account. But that's exactly what the Minister of Agriculture is asking farmers to do. And many of these farmers in their Agri-Invest account is maybe $5,000 or $10,000. It's not a huge amount of money that we're talking about here. But the Minister of Agriculture is telling those producers, you better drain your savings account, and then maybe we'll look at other programs that may be of assistance to you. They're not asking that of any other sector in Canada's economy. And it's not fair. And the ramifications of that are quite profound. Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, one of the Canadian experts on food security, has said 15% of Canadian farms are in jeopardy of going bankrupt if there is no federal assistance. That is 30,000 family farms are in jeopardy. That is a huge number. And we can't possibly fathom the impact that will have on our rural economies. But more important, Mr. Speaker, what impact is that going to have on Canada's food security? What kind of impact is that going to have on the price of groceries on the store shelves? And I know that's something for many of us in this room. Never in our lifetimes have we gone to a grocery store and seen empty shelves until now. And I'm hopeful as a result of this that Canadians across this country now have a much better appreciation about where their food comes from, about who makes it, how we do it, why we do it. Every single day we are asking Canadians across this country to stay home, protect themselves, stay healthy. But at the same time, because they're deemed an essential service, we're asking farmers, ranchers, employees at food processors to get up every single day, go to work, and work hard to make sure that we have food on our tables and food on our grocery store shelves. What those people are doing is they're asking for respect. And that respect comes from being a priority in this current government and the programs that it's putting forward. And it is very clear that Canada's food security and our supply chain is not a priority for this government. To have $250 million to be given to farmers through various programs, and I guess the other frustration with this, Mr. Speaker, is these are not new programs. This is not new money. So for the government to come out and say, we've taken these steps to address the COVID-19 pandemic, even with this Dairy Commission change in this legislation. These aren't to address a pandemic. These are not extraordinary measures to deal with an unprecedented challenge within our agriculture sector. This is just re-announcements of existing programs. What message does that send to Canadian agriculture? I'll tell you what they're saying. They're saying the farmhouse is burning down and the Liberal government is standing by and offering us a bottle of water as assistance and help. That's just not good enough. That is not good enough for Canadian agriculture. That's not good enough for our farmers. It's not good enough for our ranchers and our processors who are working hard every day to do their jobs, and they do it with pride. And all they're asking for is a Liberal government to stand beside them and show that the work that they're doing means something. And I think the question that this government has to ask themselves is the Liberal government's food security plan to ensure that we have to import food from other countries to feed Canadian families. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Prince Albert.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his presentation here this afternoon. You know, I am really concerned being on the Trade Committee and what we've seen happen in the USMCA and what happened in regards to our sovereignty and how the U.S. now gets to dictate on where we can or can't export our milk products. And I am a little concerned when he says that this funding has come about, not necessarily because of the COVID crisis, but because of the possibility of that agreement and other agreements that this government signed on to. So do you think they're using the COVID crisis to hide the mistake they made in their trade agreement?
Member for Foothills, and I want to remind the honourable members when they ask the question to place it through the speaker, not directly to the member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Prince Albert for that question. And I think there's no doubt about it when we've seen over the last several weeks that the United States has asked Canada to make sure that 100% of TRQs go to retailers, when the dairy processors and producers are asking for those TRQs to be as close to the farm gate as possible. So the Liberal government has seen that in no other trade agreement in our history, has Canada surrendered our trade sovereignty to another country. But that's exactly what has happened in the USMCA. Now the United States has control or can get involved in any trade negotiations we have with new non-market trading partners. And also they now control the growth of critical dairy products that are produced right here in Canada. No other trade agreement is that possible, but that's happened under this Liberal government with the USMCA.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député de Berthier-Masquin.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquin-Angers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank my colleague for his speech, which I very much appreciate. We agree on many points. I would like to know what his impressions are when it comes to the level of support offered to agriculture throughout the country compared to what's done internationally, for example, compared to the United States, and his medium to long-term vision when it comes to our food security if we don't do more, because there are necessary and urgent measures that are required. Thank you.
Foothills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for the question, and he's exactly right. Canada is falling well behind our allies and our competitors around the world when it comes to assistance for our agriculture sector. And Bob Lowe, the president of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, said that in the committee last week when he said, it is very clear, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here a little bit, Mr. Speaker, but it's very clear that Canadian agriculture is not getting the respect it deserves from this current government when you compare it to the assistance that's being given from other countries. There's no question, there is incredible opportunities for Canadian agriculture, but it is going to be struggling through this as a result of the policies and the inaction of this Liberal government. And the impact of that is going to be Canadians are going to see higher grocery store prices this fall, or many products aren't going to be available unless we import them from other countries. And that is a shame when we can be producing these products right here at home.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is that the Conservative government cut $400 million in 2013 from the Agri-Stability Fund and the Business Risk Management Program. So why is it now that when we're improving the program that this is such a significant improvement?
I am so happy that my colleague asked that question, Mr. Speaker. Because when we made those changes to the business risk management programs, there was no carbon tax. We had not lost $5 billion in foreign market access for our commodities. We did not have illegal blockades and CN rail strikes and grain backlogs. The landscape facing Canadian agriculture now is very different than it was under the Conservative government. There was no demands for improvements of the BRM programs under the Conservative government because agriculture was doing well. It was a priority under Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz and our Trade Minister Ed Fast, who found 50 new global markets for our agriculture products. But in the last 5 years under this Liberal government, agriculture has been an afterthought, it's been neglected, and this is the result that we're seeing because of that.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, l'honorable député de Beauce.
The Honourable